Five Guys. Sean Shannon Price.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
What we sat down here today to talk about was Chapter 45, Blademaster, and her symbol is the heron-marked sword.
I love this chapter. The confrontation between Rand and Turok is just classic in my head.
It is really classic.
Because for me, it's when Rand becomes a Blademaster. That's what this means.
Well, it is when he truly becomes a Blademaster.
He kills another Blademaster in one-on-one combat.
Yeah.
And, admittedly, it's not witnessed, but...
And fairly narrowly, I noticed.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
It seems like the Shan Chan and Randlanders are pretty evenly matched as far as what their best can offer. And I imagine Turok is not the best, nor is Rand. The rising sun pushed its crimson edge above the horizon and sent long shadows down the cobblestone streets of Falma toward the harbor. A sea breeze bent the smoke of breakfast cook fires inland from the chimneys. Only the early risers were already out of doors, their breath making steam in the morning cold. Compared to the crowds that would fill the streets in another hour, the town seemed nearly empty. Sitting on an upended barrel in front of a still-closed ironmonger's shop, Nynaeve warmed her hands under her arms, and surveyed her army. Min sat on a doorstep, across the way, swathed in her Shan Chan cloak and eating a wrinkled plum, and Elaine, in her fleece coat, huddled at the edge of an alley just down the street from her. A large sack, pilfered from the docks, lay neatly folded beside Min. My army, Nynaeve thought grimly, but there isn't anybody else. So the girls are sitting here, they're basically scouting out. They've picked strategic positions on this block so they can watch to see who's coming and they can signal each other.
So their plan is to knock out a Soldam and a Domne.
Right.
Take their dresses.
Jump them, tie them up, take their clothes, and pose as them.
You look a little short for a Soldam.
Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper?
That's basically the plan, is they're going to go in dressed as the enemy. And at this point, they don't know that the Soldam can channel.
Or have the ability.
Just curious if you knew who this yellow-haired woman or the dark woman with the collar. I assume the dark woman was one of the sea folk.
Is the dark woman the colored one?
Yeah.
Does anyone know if those are known people?
I thought that maybe she could have been Rima, because Rima is described as dark-haired, and this is a dark woman. But it seems to be more likely.
It's probably just random.
Yeah, and I don't think she's a native Shan Chan, because she turns around and punches the soul down. The native Shan Chan would cower in fear if they were released.
The way the freed Damani acted after that made me think that she was probably just a recently captured local girl.
Exactly. And the fact that she's dark makes me say sea folk. I do think that the one who's captured is sea folk, because she's both dark and it seems to be recently captured.
I like that idea. A sea folk channeler.
Mm-hmm.
I have here, Nynaeve had no real notion of whether what she planned would work or not. Once again, she resolved that if anything went wrong, she would somehow pull attention to herself while Min and Elaine escaped. She had told them to run if anything went wrong, and let them think she would run too, which she's not intending on doing.
It's noble Nynaeve.
So noble.
I know. Well, she thinks that she wants to protect the folks. She's there to protect them, and so she's willing to sacrifice herself to make sure that the girls get away. Even though these aren't necessarily Two Rivers folk, because it's Min and Elaine.
Yeah.
Not anyone from the Two Rivers.
She's just like that. So they're sitting there scoping out this little crossroads, waiting for a Soldam and Damani pair to walk by.
A dozen people are also there.
Yeah, so there's people there.
There's people there.
They have to get in, take these people, and get out before they're recognized or anyone comes.
And so Nynaeve gets all pissed off. And
Nynaeve gathered all of her anger. She just thinks about the position Egwene is in and how messed up the Adam system is.
I just want to make a point here about how frequently Nynaeve deliberately makes herself angry.
Yeah.
That
happens a lot.
It does. That she's not necessarily angry because it's something that she just instinctively is angry all the time. She's deliberately, either people are trying to make her angry, or she's deliberately making herself angry because she knows that is the precondition for channeling.
So she does it to herself.
People are like, oh, Nynaeve's so angry. And it's like, well, yeah, she has to be. I also wanted to point out here that she uses the Blackthorn
Oh, I liked that too. White blossom on a black thorny branch had opened to the light to Sidar.
So we remember back when, who suggested that she use the blackthorn? Was it Varen? Sorry, not the blackthorn as in Brandon Sanderson.
Well, when you say the, it sounds, Varen suggested she was like, oh, you don't like roses because they're too girly or something? Then use a blackthorn bush. Mm-hmm. She opens herself up to Sidar and uses this little trick she's been practicing in the streets of Thalma, opening collars with a little whip crack of the power. Just a tiny little flow.
Well, she tried it once.
It didn't work. It worked the second time,
yeah.
I think.
I think this is the first time she's actually managed to open a collar.
The silver collar sprang open and clattered to the cobblestones. Nynaeve heaved a sigh of relief even as she leapt to her feet. The Suldam stared at the fallen collar as if at a poisonous snake. The Damani put a shaking hand to her throat, but before the woman in lightning-marked dress had time to move, the Damani turned and punched her in the face. The Suldam's knees buckled, and she almost fell. "Good for you!" Elaine shouted.
So I want to talk a little bit about the opening mechanism of the collar. What I think she's doing, I think all you need to do is physically squeeze the two sides of the collar, and it pops open. Kind of like the way, I don't even know, is there a name for them? Where you have a clip that's 3 prongs, and you push it into a holder, and they sort of pop out to the sides, and then to release it, you squeeze and then pull it apart. So it's what the dog collar is.
A plastic buckle.
Yeah, it's like it's a weird plastic buckle, but I imagine that they're doing basically the same thing, only using an ADOM and the way it links together. When she's doing that whip crack thing, what she's doing is actually just pressing 2 points on the collar opposite each other to make it pop open. You know, you don't need to use the power. All she's doing is physically manipulating the collar. She just happens to be using the power and air.
Yeah, you can open it physically. She produced a handful of rags from her pocket and ruthlessly stuffed them into the gaping mouth of the still staggering Suldam. She shoves rags down the woman's throat and drags her off down an alley.
And she's staggering because she's got punched in the face by the Domne who took off.
Yeah, she runs away.
Hopefully she makes it out. I don't know. I was looking for a long time to see if, like, she ends up being one of the recaptured Damani.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't. We get so little information about this one that it could be anybody.
Yeah.
So, and no one that I could find is like, oh, I escaped for a little while and I got recaptured, or I used to be a Damani and then escaped. Like, I think she's just a character. She's not named. I don't think she ever shows up again, but I'd love to hear otherwise.
Now they're in a rapidly emptying street as people, I want to say pretend not to notice, but they don't want trouble with the Shanchan. They don't want any more fights. They all and Nynaeve estimates that it will take some time, like an hour or two, for any word of this to reach the Shanchan, because the local population isn't exactly friendly, although they're not hostile.
They're a cowed populace. They want no trouble. They don't want to deal with anything. They don't want to be in trouble. They just want to keep their heads down and not deal with either the chain channelers or the monsters that are patrolling the street. You know, she's assuming, because there's no other Shanchan there, that no one's going to, go out of their way to report something like this.
Right. They just want to go home and not be bothered.
I noticed no one wants to touch the ADOM. They all think it's, like, gross and disgusting. Sort of the same thing with the sad bracelets that we see dominate Rand, that have that, like, they really have this feeling of, like, that is much more intense, but these bracelets have, like, a slimy feel to them. And I think it has to do with just the imprisonment and the control of somebody else is not a good thing. I don't know if it's psychological or if it's...
I always assumed it was more psychological. I didn't think of it as like a real magical
feel.
Sensation.
Yeah. I mean, certainly with the sad bracelets, there is something magical. But with the ADOM, I don't think there is.
And so they drag this woman into some shed in an alley and pull her dress off. And Min says, "This might fit you, Nynaeve, but neither she nor Elaine." Yeah, I have this here. Nynaeve wiggled her toes in the boots. They were a little too tight. The dress was tight too, across the bosom and loose elsewhere. The hem hung almost to the ground, lower than Suldam wore them, but the fit would have been even worse on any of the others.
So I think back in one of the first episodes, I was like, oh, and Nynaeve's got big boobs. And you're like, really? And I was like, and I pointed to this quote. And I was like, yeah, because she steals this dress.
Like, really the only hints we get? Robert Jordan doesn't really describe people's bodies a lot. You're sort of left to figure it out as you go along. You get, like, an axe handle across the shoulders, or...
Right. But yet at the same time, like, I can picture them really well. But yeah, I definitely picture Nynaeve as a little bit taller and just a little bit larger than the other girls. She has Nynaeve has a huge presence in my mind. You know, the whole Two Rivers, Two Rivers are square people.
I imagine her as a average-sized woman, and Elaine and Min as small.
That too.
Height, 1 span, 4 inches.
That means nothing to me.
I'll look up span. Oh, this says 3 feet to a pace, 2 paces to a span. That would make Nynaeve 6'4".
That's not right.
Yeah, that would make Nynaeve 6'4".
If she's a span 4 inches?
Yeah, that would make her like as tall, almost as tall as Rand.
Yeah, they have Nynaeve at 5'4". They actually have Elaine as taller than Nynaeve. Yeah, everything I'm reading is Elaine is like 2 inches taller than Nynaeve, which doesn't fit the whole like dress issue where they talk about how it would be, it's long on Nynaeve, but it would be even longer on everybody else.
I always imagined her as taller.
I did too. I imagined her as 5'8".
Yeah, around 5'8".
Their original plan is to put the collar on Elaine. And, you know, you've got Nynaeve as the Soul Dom, Elaine as the Dominate, and Min just like as a servant. But Nynaeve's like, I need to know what this does, so I'm going to go ahead and put it around. We've got this other woman here. I want to make sure it's not going to hurt Elaine.
I'm nodding.
You know, let me snap it around her neck. And Min's like, don't do that. That's pointless. Like, she can't channel.
Nynaeve says, there's one way to find out.
Very practical.
With only a moment of hesitation, she bent and snapped it around the neck of the Soul Dom.
Min assumes that the Soul Dam can't channel, because that's what she's been told.
Yeah.
That this only works on women who can channel. Which, just a point I want to make about the testing. When they're looking for girls who can channel, they're not testing them with the ADOM. Because if they were, they'd get all the Soul Dom as well. They're not like going around like putting the collar around people's necks. That's not the test.
No.
What they're doing is they must just bring the girls by existing Domine and just sense whether or not she has the spark.
They put the bracelet on to see if the young women can sense, but they put the neck part on a Damani to see if they can feel the other woman, to see if they can sense the other woman through the link, and that's how they can see if someone can be a Soul Dom.
What they do is they give the bracelet to all the girls, and that's the testing for the Soul Dom. But they don't do the opposite and put the collar around the little girls' necks.
No, I think they just walk the women by a linked pair.
Yeah.
To see if they can sense their ability to channel.
Right.
So they only get women who would have been Wilders, essentially.
Those with the spark, who are already channeling, not the ones who have the potential for channeling.
Not like Nynaeve and Egwene, not like other women who had to learn.
Right. Yeah, all of our major characters have the spark.
Yeah, Moraine had the spark. It seems to be related to how powerful the channeler is, but I don't think we ever hear anything about that.
It does seem to be that if you're above a certain power level, you're just going to channel naturally.
Yeah.
And below a certain power level, you have to learn.
Yeah. It's not something that's talked about a lot either.
No, it's not. And that's more of a logical thing, where I'm just like, if they put the collar around everybody's neck, they would very clearly like get everybody who could possibly channel, not just the Soul Dom.
Which I'm sure is why the tradition exists, because there has to be people to control.
Totally.
Nynaeve says, I won't hurt you if you answer my questions truthfully to the collared Soul Dom. We aren't Shan-Shan, but if you lie to me, she shifted the leash threateningly. The woman's shoulders shook, and her mouth curled around the gag in a sneer. It took Nynaeve a moment to realize the Soul Dom was laughing. Her mouth tightened, but then a thought came to her. That bundle of sensation inside her head seemed to be everything physical that the other woman felt. Experimentally, she tried adding to it.
So the other one's laughing at her because she's like, that doesn't work on me. Like, you're being ridiculous. I can't channel. And then it does. and her world falls apart. And this is Sita, the woman who has basically been torturing Egwene this whole time.
Nynaeve does that thing, and I have like a few lines down. The Sildam sagged, weeping. What did you do to her? Elaine asked.
And, I don't think that's like, she's not weeping because it's incredible pain. I think she's weeping because she's realized that her life is over.
The same thing Shiriam did to you when you threw a cup at Marith.
Shiriam. Dark friend alert. The Black Ajah does like to cause pain, don't they?
Yeah.
I often wonder if many of these spankings and beatings and punishment that happen in the White Tower have more to do with the Black Ajah causing pain and that becoming an accepted practice in the White Tower. I wonder how much of that's a culture of the Aes Sedai, is to like really
be whipped and beaten as penance or punishment.
And I wonder how much of that just comes from the rampant Black Ajah presence and how that affects their attitudes.
I don't know. It could go either way.
It could. But there's so many Black Ajah. Like, that's the thing is, like, it's such a massive presence in the White Tower. It's not like a couple people here and there. It's like a third of their number. It's huge.
It's quite a bit.
Look left, look right. One of those two women is Black Ajah. Or you are, right? Like,
yeah.
It's incredible. Like, you're going to be influenced by the culture of the Shadow.
Min says an Adam isn't supposed to work that way. Nynaeve says I don't care how it's supposed to work as long as it's doing what it can, as long as it continues doing what it's doing.
Sita tries to like bribe them.
Yeah, she says I won't report you. I'll pay you to just leave. Just take this off my neck.
Right. Nynaeve's like,
be quiet.
Be quiet. Lane's a little slow sometimes. She still hasn't put two and two together and been like, oh, that should be our Domne. So she's like, all right, I'll be the Domne. And Nynaeve's like, shut up. We've got one. This works.
Nynaeve says, I'm skipping ahead a bit. You don't want to be seen? Good. Neither do we. No one really looks at Damani, though. As long as you keep your head down the way a leashed one is supposed to, no one will even notice you.
That's a good point. So they're basically using her desire to not be seen as a channeler to hide them.
Sita agrees emphatically. She swears it. Where are we going? Seta said, quickly, adding, if I may ask. Into the lion's den, Elaine told her. To dance with a dark one, Min said. Nynaeve sighed and shook her head. What they are trying to say is, we are going where all the Damani are kept, and we intend to free one of them. Seta was still gaping in astonishment when they hustled her out of the shed.
Your pet that you abuse the fuck out of. Little Thule. We're taking her.
She's going to kick your ass.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So we do a perspective switch over to Bail Domon.
This was a nice opening, but I don't have much here. Bail Domon watched the rising sun from the deck of his ship. The docks were already beginning to bustle, though the streets leading up from the harbor stood largely empty. A gull perched on a piling stared at him. Gulls had pitiless eyes.
Do you think that's one of the Dark One's eyes?
They are carrion eaters.
I suppose they are, aren't they?
Yeah.
I often wonder, because, like, they've been watching him. They've been trying to get this seal from him.
I never thought that, but why would RJ go to the effort to write that sentence? It could mean anything. Is it all carrion eaters? Because we only see rats and ravens, right?
Well, we see Grendel do a pigeon,
but that's the
that's not the dark
true
one.
Power weave. That doesn't Demandred use a hawk?
Yeah.
In the last battle.
I mean, I don't see any reason why it couldn't be.
I like it. I like it though. Why not?
And we see that a lot with the ravens, where the ravens have eyes without pity. So it's just that catchphrase that makes me think Dark One's eyes.
A chapter from the first book, Eyes Without Pity. In this couple of paragraphs, that is Domon's perspective. Domon saying, basically giving orders to keep a sailor near every mooring line and have them all holding an axe. But if anyone swings the axe before he gives the order, he'll split his skull.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
Use the axe.
Usually he's a little more creative. That's why I look for it.
I gotta say, though, sailors are really good at untying and tying lines. I can't imagine that they'd really need the axe to get through it.
I guess not.
Maybe it's like an emergency thing if they need to pull off and there's it's taut or something and you need to cut through it.
If you need to frantically run, yeah.
Yeah. It's not that hard to undo a line from its mooring. It only takes a few seconds.
I don't know what you would do on a big ship like that. I've tied up smaller boats, and it is actually, you only tie a very simple knot. Yeah. It's mostly you wrap it. Have you ever used
totally. And they just have those anvil-looking things.
Just wrap this rope around this thing a bunch of times, and then it won't ever go anywhere.
Yeah, it's great.
Later, someone does try to use an axe, and Damon stops him.
So he's just waiting
For the girls to show up.
So there's sort of a really quick check-in. It's a very odd little bit.
Yeah, you've said this before, but it's a little weird that Damon's even in this because he's just not used.
Right.
They have this set up escape route, but he runs.
And they don't even try and get to him.
No.
I never really figured out why Damon is included in this little bit.
It gets a seal there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the seal shows up. And
it's
then
cool to have a B character.
And he certainly ends up being part of the whole Sean Chan narrative.
And then we break into Rand's perspective. The breeze from the sea brought the smell of breakfast cooked by us to Rand's nose, and tried to flap at his moth-eaten cloak, but he held it close with one hand as Red neared the town. There had not been a coat to fit him in the clothes they had found, and he thought it best to keep fine silver embroidery on his sleeves and herons on his collar hidden. The Shanshan attitude toward conquered people carrying weapons might not extend to those with the heron-marked swords either. And so they're the 5 Varen selected, 5 ride forth, 4 return, and they're wearing local clothes that they've picked together from abandoned houses.
Yeah, and Rand's got this moth-eaten cloak. It's very, very Fisher King.
This is where he gets stabbed too. Well, he gets stabbed in the chapter that Aradia and Kelsey will do. We're laughing because they already recorded it.
We're recording this slightly out of order. So
yeah.
So they leave their horses behind to get into the city. Oh, no, never mind. They're in the city.
He says, we'll leave the horses here and go the rest of the way on foot. So they get to the town.
So they sneak in, and he goes into a stable and waves them in one at a time as they're walking by. He's like, come here, come here, come here. And so they all gather in the stable, and then they leave the horses behind and walk the rest of the way.
The sniffer added, Vane went right down that street, Lord Rand. I can almost smell it from here. I noted Ingtar's eyes had a feverish intensity when he realizes that Hurin can smell Fane.
Again, I think that comes back to that. We've talked about this before, but the compulsion that's in there to seek the horn.
He wants that horn.
He needs that horn.
Noted here that Rand felt he had to bring the dragon banner with him. How providential.
Yeah.
As Hurin.
Well, I mean, it's Moraine. It might save your life someday. So he tries to keep it with him as much as possible.
He's still weird about anyone seeing it. He hasn't proclaimed himself yet. The big battle over Falma is the moment when he doesn't even accept it then, but everybody else kind of does.
Yeah. Actually, Lanfear has a good quote where she says, he doesn't believe yet, but he knows.
Yeah.
I think after this battle in Falma, he knows he's the Dragon Reborn. He logically can say, I am the Dragon Reborn, but he doesn't believe yet, and that's why he has to go for Kalimdor.
Right. He doesn't want to believe.
No.
Rand thought they all looked like villainous beggars, but they had all passed largely unnoticed in the villages.
So they're out first thing in the morning, but they've gathered in a group of 5. It's a little unusual.
A little.
Sort of look if I saw 5 warrior-like dudes walking around in the morning in the streets of the city.
Villainous beggars.
So I was out walking my dog and saw 5 villainous, Ingtar and Hurin and...
With lumps in the shape of swords under their cloaks
right.
or something.
Be
They are all armed, so.
That's true.
They walked in a bunch, but it was Hurin who led them.
Fane's obviously been here for months and months and months and months. So he's been all over the city because he spent 4 months hanging out here doing who knows what.
So Hurin has a lot of trouble tracking him because he's he's been here and here and here.
Yeah, and so he's just looking for the freshest scent that he can find.
His smell is everywhere, and it stinks so. It's hard to tell old from new, he says.
They pass some soldiers and some Grolm.
This is Turok's palace.
I like Huron and Rand looking at each other we know what those are. We've
Yeah.
seen those before in the portal world. But Ingtar's no, just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're here for the horn, Ingtar said, not to stare at Shanshan monsters.
It's just a fun coincidence that the monsters appear after we see them in the portal world, and Rand's whoa, I didn't think those were real.
They walk a bit more, and Matt suddenly clutched his cloak with both hands. It's in there, he whispered. The dagger is in there. I didn't even notice it before, because of those things, but I can feel it.
So he was distracted by the Grolm, and how weird looking they were, but he'd walked right by where the dagger was. Which, I mean, it makes sense that, like, the dagger's in there, the horn's in there, it's where Fane's been. It's like, it all comes together. I think it's weird that Ingtar kind of walks right by it. He's so obsessed with the horn.
Rand puts forth a couple options, like we can wait till night, we can wait for him to come out, like we can just watch the entrances and exits, and Ingtar says, I do not mean to wait for Varen, Ingtar said, and neither will I wait for night. I've waited too long already. I mean to have the horn in my hands before the sun sets again. But we don't know, Ingtar. I know the dagger is in there, Matt said, and Hurin says Fane was here last night. Ingtar overrode Hurin's attempts to qualify that. It is the first time you have been willing to say anything closer than a day or two. We are going to take back the horn. Now. Now. There seem to be gardens behind all those houses, Ingtar said.
What is with Rand and garden walls? He just loves to hop over them to get into palaces. Do people not guard their garden walls? They just like set up. Apparently, that's a big thing.
Sometimes men are so busy guarding their front, they neglect to guard their back. Come.
I want Rand to sneak into like a garden walled place in every single book. I think that would be hilarious.
I think from here on out, he pretty much just storms the front door. Rand exchanged looks with Perrin. His curly-haired friend gave a resigned shrug, and they followed.
God, I'm just watching Ingtar just like jump ahead of the rest of them. I'm going. If you ever played a video game or something where you're like supposed to stick together as a group and the tank just keeps running ahead, you're like, so would you stop it? You're going to get us in trouble. Like, stop running ahead. Ingtar is just obsessed. He's going for that horn and nothing's going to stop him.
He is pretty crazed. He gets there, like pulls himself up onto the fence and says, count to 50, then follow me.
Mm-hmm.
He just jumps down, gets down there, kills a guard, drags his body into the bushes, and waits.
And that totally screws them.
Well, that's what eventually gets them found.
Yeah, because they find the dead guard, and then like he's like, "Oh, dead guard! I know exactly what they're going for." And so they like surround them. Yeah. So Ingtar's hastiness is totally what gets them in that terrible, terrible situation.
I mean,
they survive it.
Yeah,
but like Rand would not have had to fight Turok if Ingtar hadn't just killed his guard. Rand would, and Rand almost lost.
But how else would they have gotten the horn?
Well, I mean, you wait for him to go by. You don't have to kill the guy. You can sneak by him. Like, Ingtar was, like, way too hasty.
The man was overconfident. He never even tried to raise a cry. I hid his body under one of those bushes.
The Sean-Chan was overconfident? Dude, you're sneaking into it. Like, that's the thing. He is not acting normally.
We're almost there. Ingtar sounded as if he were speaking to himself. Almost there. They see a...
Dako Vale.
Did you see that? Matt said hoarsely. You could see right through. Ingtar clapped a hand around Matt's mouth.
Matt does like the girls.
Points them in the direction of the dagger.
Mm-hmm.
Ingtar just leaps through the door into an empty room, which is, we've seen this before. It's Turok's this chamber that he's got a single chair sitting and facing his artifacts, and he just sits on it and is served coffee, and he sips it and looks at his nice things.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Oh, yeah.
This is where we know there are 2 seals in that cabinet.
The horn, the dagger,
a whole bunch of Quendiar. It's interesting. The boys totally they don't even notice the seals that are sitting in the cabinet. Well, I guess the horn and the dagger are on a stand on a table. They're not necessarily in the cabinet themselves.
Right.
So I guess the boys never actually opened the cabinet up. And so I guess they wouldn't actually have seen the seals in the cabinet, but...
Matt runs to the table and grabs the stuff.
Which the dagger and the horn being linked is really what makes Matt blow the horn. Because here he picks them both up. And then he's the one who carries the horn the rest of the time.
It makes him the horn sounder.
Yeah. There's definitely a link between the horn and the dagger here.
It is really the only reason that Ingtar doesn't grab it, because Matt runs for the dagger, grabs it right away, and he grabs both the dagger and the horn. And even later, when they're running away, when Matt goes to jump a fence, he throws the horn of Lear over a wall and then climbs up over after it.
Just irreverent as hell.
Ingtar's like, what the And Matt's like, it's fine. It's
not even
just keep going.
Yeah. I mean, which is the right thing. This is an item of legend that has lasted ages after ages.
It over a brick wall.
It's not going to be hurt by throwing it over a brick wall.
But we have all this lead up to Matt lobbing the horn over a wall so that he can climb it.
Totally classic Matt.
But I don't think he throws the dagger. He holds that. I noted here there's just a short line. Perrin's hands were busy on the haft of the axe. They seem to want to be holding something else.
That's great. That's a total hammer axe foreshadowing. I missed that totally. Great catch.
It's subtle, but I thought it was pretty obvious if you...
Yeah, once you read the sentence. So Rand looks across the street and through the window of the building across the street and sees into the gardens behind the building across the street.
Yeah, and he sees Egwene, but it's so far away that he's not even 100% sure, although he is 100% sure, if you know what I mean.
She's too far away to make out clearly, but he knows it's her. And Egwene sees him, too.
Just a little before that, I just noticed that Ingtar says, "The Horn of Valir, it is by the light, it is, I am saved."
Mm-hmm.
From what, Ingtar?
Well, he thinks the horn's going to save him. He thinks that by blowing the horn, think only of your salvation is the whole issue with the horn, right? And he's thinking about being saved from being a dark friend. By
the glory of winning a battle for the light.
Exactly. And blowing the horn and being the one who brings the horn back to the light.
Oh, yeah. And immediately after, Rand says, "I have to get her out. The rest of you," I'm assuming he's going to say, like, "The rest of you just go, like, I'm going to look after Egwene myself."
Because we've got the horn. You guys get out, and I'm going to go rescue Egwene.
"But the rest of you, so," the slurring voice was as soft as the sound of the doors sliding in their tracks. "You are not who I expected." For a brief moment, Rand stared. The tall man with the shaven head, who had stepped into the room, wore a long, trailing blue robe, and his fingernails were so long that Rand wondered if he could handle anything. The two men standing obsequiously behind him had only... that's a SAT word for you. Obsequiously behind him had only half their dark hair shaved, the rest hanging in a dark braid down each man's right cheek. One of them cradled a sheathed sword in his arms.
So he just has a couple of servants following him around to carry
holding his sword for him.
Yeah. Because he's got those long fingernails. That's why I think he may not be the best Blademaster.
Well, yeah. He certainly isn't the best blade. I mean, Rand kills him. Who's on the low end of things at this point, I feel.
Fair enough.
It was only a moment he had for staring. Then screens toppled to reveal, at either end of the room, a doorway crowded with 4 or 5 Shanshan's shoulders, bareheaded but armored, with swords in hand. The other servant stepped forward, with a bow, and began undoing Turok's robe. "When one of my guards was found dead," the shaven-headed man said calmly, "I suspected the man who calls himself Fane."
I like how you said 4 or 5 Shanshan shoulders.
Oh, did I do that?
Yeah.
Whoops.
I was like, shoulders.
Shanshan shoulders. Soldiers.
All right, Sean Connery. Shanshan shoulders. This is where we find out that Huon died. It was just the guy where Fane said, "That's when he decided how you would die."
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Fane definitely killed that dude.
Turok says that he kind of turned up mysteriously dead and no one knows what happened.
But we know.
And now, to find strangers with not only the dagger, but the horn, it will please me to kill 1 or 2 of you for disturbing my mourning. Those who survive will tell me of who you are and why you came.
It's hard to know if his confidence is from being a Blademaster and actually having killed a fair number of people, or just being a lord.
I mean, he also has them outnumbered.
Yeah.
So there's 10 soldiers, I think. Does it say 5 on every side? So they're heavily outnumbered. It's
2-1.
He is overconfident, but...
He may have reason to be overconfident.
Yes.
Until Matt instinctively cuts one of the dudes with a knife. I imagine there's not much action, and the one soldier reaches out, and Matt just nicks him.
Oh, that's what happens, yeah. Turok stretched out a hand without looking. The man with the scabbarded sword laid the hilt in the hand, and drew the heavy, curved blade. I would not have the horn damaged. Turok gave no other signal, but one of the soldiers stalked into the room and reached for the horn. So I think there is a bit of that crazy overconfidence going on here. We just sends a soldier forward to take the horn.
Right.
To a group of armed men. Matt put an end to it. As the Shanshan reached out his hand, Matt slashed it with the ruby-hilted dagger. With a curse, the soldier leapt back, looking surprised, and then he screamed. It chilled the room, held everyone where they stood in astonishment. The trembling hand he held up in front of his face was turning black, darkness creeping outwards from the bleeding gash that crossed his palm. He opened his mouth wide and howled, clawing at his arm, then his shoulder. Kicking, jerking, he toppled to the floor, thrashing on the silken carpet, shrieking as his face grew black, and his dark eyes bulged like overripe plums, until a dark, swollen tongue gagged him. He twitched, choking raggedly, heels drumming, and did not move again.
The daggers also Fane uses on an accepted, I believe, when he steals it back in the White Tower. Because the dagger ends up back in the White Tower with Matt. He gets healed, and it gets put into storage.
Yeah.
And then Fane sneaks in to grab it, sets off an alarm. And one of the accepted comes to investigate.
Oh, Fane, yeah.
Yeah, and he slashes her, and she totally reacts in a similar way.
Are those the only 2 times we see it used? Like that?
He uses it on a bunch of the...
Fane uses it.
Yeah, Fane uses it. Matt never uses it again. Fane uses it on a bunch of the Ashaman in Farmatting.
Oh, right.
And he slashes Matt in when he's negotiating with the Kyrian rebels.
But then it doesn't work.
Well, only because he's healed quickly. And it's already somewhat isolated. He slashes across the existing wound, and the existing wound fights it a little bit. But that's a whole other.
Fane slashes Rand.
Yeah. Oh, did I say Matt? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, and he stabs Matt during the last battle. Yeah.
It's like, too late for that. Evil vaccine. Matt licked his lips and swallowed. His grip shifted uneasily on the dagger. Even Turok stared, open-mouthed. You see, Ingtar said softly, we are no easy meat. Suddenly, he leapt over the corpse, toward the soldiers, still goggling at what was left of the man who stood at their shoulders only moments before.
So it looks like Huron and Ingtar take on the soldiers on one side, and Matt and Perrin take the soldiers on the other.
Yeah.
The soldiers run away because they just saw what Matt's dagger did, and they don't want to face the same thing. So it's like, if you can't even get nicked, you're going to be really careful, and so they're retreating. And what's left is Rand and Turok standing alone in the room.
Rand notes the soldiers are more afraid of the dagger than Perrin's axe.
I would be too.
Turok spun his blade easily, a full circle one way, then the other. You are young. Let us see what is required to earn the heron on this side of the ocean.
Which we don't even know what's required to earn it on the other side of the ocean.
No, but, I mean, Rand seems convinced that he's a real Blademaster, like he has that exact thought, but...
Oh, that Turok is?
Yeah.
As the leader of the Forerunners, I have to assume Turok is actually relatively skilled with the blade.
Sure.
He may not be like the best Blademaster, but I assume he's a legitimate Blademaster.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed, these two cultures they had a shared culture up until Arthur Hawkwing, which was only 1,000 years ago. So they have 2,000 years of shared Blademaster culture after the breaking.
Right.
So I imagine the process that they go through is remarkably similar.
It seems that way, and Rand even notes that the sword forms are like noticeably similar to him. So whatever the martial art is, basically the same. It's very slightly different.
The fact that he's defeated by a relatively new Blademaster is what makes us think that Turok's not very good. But Rand may have a few advantages that most normal Blademasters might not have.
Rand's got at least 2 one-ups.
Yeah.
He's got the Void, and he's extensively trained in using the Void.
Which may or may not be something Turok has as well.
Maybe, but Rand's been trained since childhood, so we can maybe even say that Rand may have more training in that than most people, other than, say, Lan.
Someone who was born with a sword in their hands. Maybe Aiel. Rand has a second advantage.
He is loose there until Amon Reborn.
Yeah, and he's been channeling enough that we think there's some, at least, instincts passing through the barrier. You know, he's able to come up with the occasional weave that he doesn't really know how to do.
We see this happen more and more over time, but Seth and I have talked about this a bunch over the last week or two, and we think that, or we like to think that, this is the beginning of the madness is somewhere around here. Maybe a little earlier than this. There's some signs.
What transitions over fastest, right? Your just basic physical reactions.
Muscle memory?
Yeah, your muscle memory comes over first. That to me would make sense as something that he would pick up faster than anything else across the barrier.
The minds kind of merge.
That would be the first information he picks up. Because it's so natural to him. the sword forms. And as he's been training with Lan, it would make sense that he would have integrated those instincts into his own muscle memory very quickly, especially when using the void.
He is also Teveran.
Yeah.
So there's that.
He's trying to avoid channeling, especially since he's worried about the Soldam sensing it. If he touched Domine, if he touched Sidene, and if he could not stop himself channeling, they would know. Varen had told him. And that's interesting because we don't think they would notice, but...
No, they wouldn't.
Varen has sort of implied that they might be able to, and that is what is keeping Rand out of the void. Not just that he doesn't want to channel, but also that he doesn't want to take the risk of being sensed as a channeler.
Turok moves forward quickly and cuts Rand on the face and says, "Where did he find that blade, boy? Or do they here truly award the heron to those no more skilled than you? No matter. Make your peace. It is time to die."
It reminds me a little bit of playing ping pong. And that, like, usually when you start out with somebody new, you're sort of like lobbing things over and seeing what kind of responses they give. You're not slamming the ball into the corners to try and, like,
sure,
win right away. You're like testing to see, like, hey, can you return a lob? Can you return a little bit of spin? Like, what are your limits? Especially if you're a good ping pong player. And
yeah.
This guy basically was throwing these, various shots over the net, and Rand is like barely returning him, and he's like, "Ugh, I can't. You suck. You're no good. This is terrible."
And Rand uses the void now. He was one with the sword in his hands, one with the floor beneath his feet, one with the walls, one with Turok. He recognized the forms the High Lord used.
So this is after he embraces the void. Turok is like, "Time to die," and Rand's like, "Whew. Okay, he's not playing with me anymore. I can't just, I'm going to lose if I don't embrace the void."
The swallow takes flight meant parting the silk. Moon on the water met the wood grouse dances. Ribbon in the air met stones falling from the cliff. They moved about the room as in a dance, and their music was steel against steel. Disappointment and disgust faded from Turok's dark eyes, replaced by surprise, then concentration. Sweat appeared on the High Lord's face as he pressed Rand harder. Lightning of the three prongs met leaf on the breeze.
Great visual. Don't really need to go through all the various sword forms, but there's some great ones in there. And he's just defending himself at this point. He's like, embrace the void, and is doing everything he can to keep Turok's sword from killing him.
And then he realizes he has to get out of there and save Egwene.
Mm-hmm.
So he
considers sheathing the sword, which I thought was interesting.
But he thinks he wouldn't be able to save her if he gets stabbed.
But it just shows that it's on his mind, and especially for the battle coming up.
It becomes important in about 20 minutes in Randland time. Turok's eyes widened as Rand glided forward. So far, he had only defended. Now he attacked, all out. Every movement of his blade was an attempt to reach the High Lord. Now all Turok could do was retreat and defend, down the length of the room, almost to the door. In an instant, while Turok still tried to face the boar, which is a sword form, Rand charged. The river undercuts the bank. He dropped to one knee, blade slashing across. He did not need Turok's gasp, or the feel of resistance to his cut to know. He heard two thumps, and turned his head, knowing what he would see.
So he cut him in half, Phantom Menace style.
He said there were two thumps.
Yep. I think that's his torso and his legs.
Oh, okay.
I think he went down straight across, right through his waist, and cut Turok in half. The length of his blade is wet and red, so basically his entire blade went through the dude. Yeah, he cut Turok in half.
Jesus. The void shook. He had faced Trollocs before, faced Shadowspawn. Never before had he confronted a human being with a sword except in practice or bluff. I just killed a man.
Congratulations, Rand. First of many.
Many.
Many, many, many. The servants killed themselves, which is just fucking crazy.
Yeah.
It's one of the things about Shan-Chan culture I don't get is that just total devotion and the willingness to kill yourself.
They stab themselves ritualistically and basically seppuku.
Maybe I'll go mad, but they already were. And they just go right into the heart.
They stab themselves, so I imagine it's like in the stomach or chest. Because it would be pretty hard to stab yourself in the heart.
Each man
punch daggers into their own hearts.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty clear.
It's pretty clear.
He meets back up with Matt and Perrin.
They all come running back into the room.
Yeah.
Huron and Ingtar ran off on one side, Matt and Perrin on the other. And then after a short battle, they all four coming running back. And Rand's still standing there over the bodies.
Getting to his feet shakily. You dealt with them, Ingtar said, looking at the bodies. Then we're done. If no alarm is given, those fools never cried for help, not once. Huron goes off to look to see if anyone's coming, but nobody is.
No, which is kind of, I guess good. But that was Turok. Like, he was just overconfident. Which
reminds me, I think that the alarm, the armies in the streets and the armies marshaling in the streets, I think that's because of Nynaeve.
Yeah?
I don't think it's because of Rand.
I think it's because of the White Cloaks.
Oh,
I think because we saw in the last episode that the Rockin were scouting the White Cloaks and saw them coming
at the very end of the
chapter. And so I think they're gathering for the battle.
Yeah.
Now, it might be the disturbance in Turok's palace, but I don't think anyone knows about it. I think that's going on behind the scenes. So at this point, I don't think anybody knows either what's going on with the girls or with Turok.
The White Cloaks have provided a cover.
Exactly. They're the Ta'Viren needed distraction for everything that's going on. Yeah. I think that might be part of why they're escaping notice, is because like all the armies and the troops are out marshaling for battle. They're not here in the palace.
Rand wants to turn back for Egwene again. Ingtar says, "You're a dumbass. We have to get out of here."
And Rand says, "No, you're a dumbass. You need to realize that it's more important to rescue one girl than it is to save the world."
Right. Ingtar says, "We have what we came for, the Horn of Valir, the hope of salvation. What can one girl count, even if you love her, alongside the Horn and what it stands for? The Dark One can have the Horn for all I care. What does finding the Horn count if I abandon Egwene to do this? If I did that, the Horn couldn't save me. The Creator couldn't save me. I would damn myself." Ingtar stared at him, his face unreadable. "You mean that exactly, don't you?"
I just love that. This entire time, Ingtar's been telling himself, if I get the Horn, I can save myself. And here Rand is saying, if I were willing to leave a girl behind, it wouldn't matter. I would be damned. The Horn wouldn't do a damn thing to save me. And Ingtar's realizing, the Horn cannot, like, I've already done the horrible thing. Yeah. The Horn cannot save me. And that's when he decides to sacrifice himself, is right here in this, when he says, you mean that exactly, don't you? I think at that point he realizes, I am unredeemable. The only thing I can do, the Horn won't save me. I am not saved. I have to die.
Martyr.
I think that quote right there from Rand is really what inspires Ingtar to come to the light.
Yeah.
I think before that, he was conflicted. He was desperate. He was, I guess, not come to the light, because I do think he was coming to the light before. I think that he just thought he could come to the light, get the Horn, blow it for the light, and he would be saved. And with Rand's quote, he realized he's already done so much. That's not, blowing the Horn is not going to save him. Yeah, if anything, it's just going to corrupt the Horn.
This is kind of what I'm thinking of as pushing Ingtar over the edge of making this decision eventually, especially when he's confronted with a perfect moment to do it, where at a kind of corridor, Ingtar said, one man can hold 50 here.
I notice Ingtar tries to take the Horn from Matt here, but Matt's already running. Ingtar can never actually touch the Horn.
There's another moment, I think, when Matt throws it over the wall and jumps over and hits the ground running and grabs it. Ingtar kind of goes for it too. They crossed the garden at a dead run, climbing over the back wall rapidly. Ingtar cursed when Matt tossed the Horn of Valir ahead of him, and tried again to take it when he dropped outside, but Matt snatched it up with a quick, "It isn't even scratched," and scampered up the alley. More shouts rose from the house they had just left. A woman screamed, and someone began tolling a gong. I will come back for her, somehow. Rand sped after the others as fast as he could.
So someone discovers the dead bodies.
I think that's what the
gong
is. That what the gong is about?
I think so. A woman screams, and that's coming from the house. Yeah. Ingtar still tries to grab the Horn a couple of times.
Yeah, he's clearly really eager for it.
Right.
He sees his moment for martyrdom and salvation in
The next chapter.
The next chapter, which will be done by our good friends Kelsey and Aradia.
Yeah.
Might as well throw this at the end of this episode so that people know what's going to happen.
Definitely. Next 2 episodes are going to be... Now, they've both been guests on the show before. Kelsey a couple of times, Aradia the once. We're excited to have Aradia here in the studio. So she sounds great.
Yeah.
We're going to turn it over to them and let them do the whole episode themselves. I think you're reading a few
this
quotes.
and the next. Yeah. I just read in and out.
And then so it's chapter 46 and 47, and we'll hear us again on chapter 48.
Coming into the bar and just like, I'd say what's up and they'd be like, hey, happy Easter, and I'd be like, yeah, he's risen. And everybody would laugh. I don't know why, but I walked in this morning like really early to set up, and I said that to my coworkers because I knew that they would laugh.
Yeah.
But then I just started saying it to customers.
Only in Portland.
You could take it either way, but everybody laughed at like I was joking because I was.
Right. It is kind of funny. Jesus is back. April Fools. Wait.
You thought I was dead? Nope.
Nope.
Easter Fool's Day.
Easter Fool. Aradia, do you know why Easter falls on the day it falls? Is it the first Sunday of the month? Is it to do with the equinox? I have no idea why the Easter is when it is.
I want to say it has to do with the equinox, but I really don't know.
In 325 CE, the Council of Nicaea established that Easter would be held on the first Sunday after the full moon, occurring on or after the vernal equinox. From that point forward, the Easter date depended on the ecclesiastical approximation of March 21st for the vernal equinox.
The full moon is referred to as the Paschal full moon, that particular full moon.
So basically, we're waiting for the equinox, and then the full moon, and then the Sunday.
Right.
I can see why that's on a really odd day every year. Yeah, I knew it was April 1st, but I try to avoid everything on April 1st. Like, I'm a very trusting person, and I don't like practical jokes because, like, they'll get me every time.
I really revel in it, actually. This year I spent Christmas just alone in my apartment. It was badass.
Right?
Me and Julia were talking about the new Blade Runner movie, and I was talking about how the different intelligences are given like a clear point. Like, the point is obviously, to me anyway, of that movie was to kind of demonstrate like what is human, to kind of like ask the question and show you all these different variations. You have your like skin jobs, artificial intelligence, and what do they call them? Bred human beings.
The point of the original movie was definitely making you question who's human and who's not.
Went down a science fiction hole.
Yeah.
I talk about Dune with her brother sometimes.
It's great. Yeah, if you can go down the sci-fi hole with the family, that's a win.
Yeah.
Because then there's something to talk about besides like politics and like the weather.
And yeah, they talk about design and architecture a lot because that's what they do for a living.
Fair enough.
But it's interesting.
Yeah, but that's not your
No,
forte.
I don't know a lot. But the first time I met them, we talked about like old houses on the East Coast and funny fixtures, and like told them about the coal shaft that was in that one house we rented a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
There's a coal shaft. Of course, it's not used that way anymore. There's no furnace in the... Well, not like a... it's a gas furnace, not a coal furnace. But at some point, it was a coal furnace.
I used to have a coal furnace in Pennsylvania. We had a...
Coal country.
Yeah, we just had a coal-burning furnace in the basement, and my dad had big vats of... I want to call it...
They're like briquettes.
Pebbles. But it was almost like pebbles. Like it was it was very fine. And so it burned really quick and really hot. And I used to, as a kid, play in it, and I'd come out just like black, just covered in soot. I was getting in trouble for that one. But it felt really, it was, like when you plunge your hand into like a big bag of grain. something like that, where it
That's
kind of
interesting. I've
feels
never seen
good.
that.
Like, yeah, it had a similar feel where it was just like,
I've only seen the bricks, like whole briquettes.
this was definitely, we had like a big hopper, and you could like open the hopper and it would literally like feed it into the furnace. It was kind of a cool system. That was an improvement over the wood furnace that we'd use to heat the house when we lived in Canada, and my dad would go down and chop the trees, which was a lot of work. But
Yeah.
chainsaws make it better.
You know, guys, often we'll like sip a beer or something while we're talking, but we don't like drink. And, you know, there's not really enough time to, because your face has to be in front of the microphone.
Yeah, it's hard to drink and talk at the same time.
Yeah, and you have to keep your face in place, basically.
Right.
Or more or less. I can kind of turn from a little bit.
Yeah, the mics are designed to just pick up noise directly in front of them, and that helps us with all the other, because we're not in the quietest of space, but for the most part, by having condenser mics that don't pick up everything in the room. But, you know, it's, when you're sitting and drinking, it's just not on your mind. You know, you get into the conversation, and the beer sits there forgotten for a while.
Yeah.
You know, it's, and like, let's be honest, I don't really want to get drunk during the podcast that often.
It makes it hard to follow along. We've learned our lesson over time.
And now we're doing enough recording that if I got drunk every time we did a podcast, I'd just be drunk all the time.
Yeah.
It'd be terrible. I can't drink that much. Not anymore.
Just drunk spoilers, just wasted. That would be the entertainment aspect. We might be a little drunk on the Jordan Con episode.
Sure.
Let's just be honest.
Well,
that's
I
what
mean,
people do at conventions.
Right.
Drink, talk, walk around. Drink, talk, walk around.
Check out the costumes. Buy stuff.
In our case, we'll probably just I'll probably just carry around my backpack, and I'll have the stuff in it. So if we want to talk to someone, we can do that really quick.
Yeah, because we're just going to have a laptop, 2 mics,
It would take
USB
us
cables.
2 minutes to set up.
Yeah. We just need a spot to, like, I guess I could even put the computer on the floor and just, like, be holding the microphones.
They're pretty long cords.
Yeah,
Yeah, they could stretch from the floor.
totally.
Crown Plaza, Atlanta perimeter at Ravine. Jesus Christ, that's a really long name. I'm just going to copy and paste that. Who names a hotel 6 words? You just pick 1 or 2. Doubletree, Super 8, Motel 6, Marriott, Crown Plaza, Atlanta perimeter at Ravinia. Come on.
If there's one piece of advice that I can give to somebody before they go to a con or any sort of big thing like this,
Camel up. That's what we say on trail.
Yeah. Get that water in you, man. It's so important.
There's no water for 37 miles. Drink now.
Yep.
Because you're going to have to carry the rest. Sweat the whole time.
So I put up that thing for Jordan Con on the website to send us to Jordan Con, and you guys have definitely responded. I mean, it's been fantastic. We've gotten, double our normal pledges this month than we usually do. It's been just great to see you guys send us there. And right now, the plane tickets and the tickets to the con are paid for. We just need a little bit from next month to pay for the hotel itself.
Yeah, we're actually almost at the goal that we set, which is awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we should have enough to get us there and maybe a little extra for a few meals. So thank you so much to everybody out there.
We'll be able to go to Atlanta and eat something other than peanut butter.
So I just want to read off some of the people who have pledged this month because, again, the list has been long. So sit back, get a beverage.
And do a shot when we say your name. Go.
Samantha donated $1. Shane Warren increases pledge by $1. Thank you. Jesus Lord pledged $3. Thank you, Jesus.
How appropriate. We're recording this on Easter.
It is, yes. You have arisen.
He is risen, and he's given us. Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you. John Brandon, a pledge $5.
Thank you, John.
Paul gives us a full Tamerlan level. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
CJ Dennis donated.
We appreciate you, CJ.
Stephen Sirasulo.
Sirasulo? We're going to go with that.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephen.
$20 by Nick Hood. You rock, Nick. And now there's this is his name, Aradia Fairmare. I'm not really sure. Aradia increased.
Just kidding. She's hosting the next episode.
Right.
One of our favorite of the chosen.
Will you come over and paint my fence? And by that, I mean do my podcast.
It's a Tom Sawyer reference for those of you who don't know.
Seriously, Patrick?
I feel like people might not know.
Who doesn't know Tom Sawyer? We all had to read that in high
I feel
school.
like when you say paint the fence, people think Karate Kid. Paint the fence?
Oh, I guess.
Wax on, wax off,
wax
whatever.
off. Craig Jemison.
Jameson?
Jameson.
Could be either.
Justin Fulton.
Thank you, Justin.
Evan Mac Mildeby. See there, I did the question mark again.
Evan, Gaelic last name?
Mildeby. Evan Mildeby doubled his pledge. Awesome. Kelsey Baldwin. Always good to get another Kelsey in there.
Oh, thank you. I feel like you've been hanging out in Discord.
Jordan Martins.
Thank you, Mr. Martins.
Sean Harriet. And Chris Moeller.
We really appreciate that, Chris.
Yeah. Chris, you went above and beyond. Thank you.
You donated higher than the limit, or than the highest number that we set.
Yeah, which tells me we should probably put a higher donation level on there.
Might as well. So
thank you, everybody. That was a fantastic March going into April. So today is April 1st, and it's just been amazing to see those donations come in. So I can't thank you enough, and you guys are really making this something special.
It's really awesome to see this little thing grow slowly. I say this every time, but we never expected that so many people would care.
Nodding.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?